Regina Montoya, co-chair of the Women's Leadership Forum at the DNC. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Jack. It's great to see you today.
Good to see you. So you are going to be co-hosting one of the private fundraisers for President Biden when it comes to the Dallas area. Why is this so important to you and to the campaign?
This is so important to me because I want to be sure that everyone hears the message of President Biden and his achievements. And the way we can do that is that we are able to get the messaging out. And some of the, that's already occurring for Latinos con Biden, for example, that just got launched in Arizona by the president. There is already a media buy, and people are going to be hearing about the extraordinary achievements of this president.
One of the things that you have been telling me is just how early this is for having so many fundraisers and so many efforts for a presidential re-election campaign. What do you mean by that?
Usually, you wait almost until the convention. And after the convention, which this year is in August in Chicago, that's normally when you would see it. People are starting to pay attention in September, October. They're seeing the election coming up in a few months, but not this year. It has started much, much earlier with media campaigns, media buys, where the campaign is actually buying advertising to get that message out. So this is a much earlier one. The other part of this, too, is that there are more offices that are being set up in each of the individual states, and particularly in the swing states. They're already up and running, and they are moving and making sure that messaging is getting out to folks. Because I think part of it is that we have so many ways of getting information, and what we want to be sure is that whatever method you use to get your information, we're going to be there to let you know how much President Biden has done for each one of us and our households and our families and our kids.
Why is this happening, though? I mean, so early. Is it because, I mean, for months now we've seen the polls, and it shows that Mr. Biden, President Biden, is behind former President Donald Trump. I mean, if you look at the general election polls, according to Real Clear Politics, Trump is up by 2%. Up by about a little more than 2% with the five-way race with the other candidates. And in the top battleground states, he's up barely in Wisconsin, but Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, barely Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Nevada.
And many of those polls that you've cited still had a number of different candidates on the Republican side. Now that's changed. We know who the two candidates are for president. We know that it's going to be President Biden running for re-election and former President Trump, who is running, and he is going to be the candidate for the Republicans. That has changed now, I think, for people recognizing we know what the race is going to look like. Let's start tuning in and let's start seeing who really is going to help us. And we would say that President Biden, with his different achievements, I mean, I was just at the White House on Monday for the Women's History Month event, and there the president was able to announce the initiatives that he and his cabinet and his administration will be supporting for women's research in health. And those are the kinds of bread and butter kinds of issues that once people hear how it's affecting them in a positive way, that's the message. But we've got to start early to get that messaging out. Even though it's a long time until November, we're not taking anything for granted.
And how do you think the president will be able to reverse some of these polling trends that we've seen, you know, nationally and then in these battleground states?
The important part is the president is getting his message out to the community. I had the great privilege to be with him in Atlanta just 10 days ago at a big event that was sold out, talking about his initiatives, and three groups, the Collective, the Latino Victory Fund, and also the AAPI Victory Fund, all supporting him, all working together with the three coalitions, African American, Latino, and AAPI, to support him. The Asian Americans, yes, to support the president's agenda. So all of those were together, and there was the president up front, just a couple of days after the State of the Union there. Where is he now? He's in Arizona and Nevada, states that not necessarily even his opponent has been in this year, particularly in Arizona. So he is out there absolutely taking nothing for granted, out in all of these states, coming to Texas, you know, visiting with some of his top supporters. That's who he is, and he is working hard.
How is he going to overcome what a lot of the polls say is that he's too old. He shouldn't run for re-election.
He has the experience, and that's what he's demonstrating. When people see him, and the State of the Union was that perfect example, this was a president that was talking about the issues, knew how to handle the issues, robust, just energetic about what he was talking about, and that paid dividends. You could see that even here in Dallas. After the State of the Union, we just got ready to start being able to invite people to this amazing event. And it was just incredible, the support, the outpouring of support that we saw as a result of his honing in on that message and people liking the message.
Border security here in Texas, obviously, it's the #1 issue. And so Republicans have blamed President Biden for creating this situation that we see, the record numbers of people. So how does he address that issue?
Well, he would have to say Congress is the one who's responsible for that. They had an opportunity, a bipartisan bill that was put forward that they did not support in the end. And so much of that comes from Congress being able to come up and fashion something. So where are we now? The Supreme Court is saying one thing. The Court of Appeals is saying another. No one knows what's happening on the border. This is why it's important that it stay with the national side so that there isn't this confusion. And this is what happens when a state gets involved in all of this. Incredible confusion. And I think President Biden very wisely has said, Congress, I will work with you on this. I tried to work with you on this last bill. Let's put something together. And it's been decades since something has been done by Congress. It's really time for Congress to act, and the president recognizes that.
And Republicans, come back at that and say the president doesn't need a new law to stop people from coming into the U.S.
But this is where you already have this confusion. States coming in trying to do some of their own thing. The last thing you want is the police to be in the middle of all of this, trying to be the peacekeepers on it, and that's just going to be really difficult.
You mentioned before women's health, and reproductive rights is certainly one issue that the Biden-Harris campaign has really hit hard on. Why is that so important to his re-election campaign?
When women are recognized that their rights have been taken away, and the perfect example was at the State of the Union, at least a couple of women from Texas who have found themselves in dire predicaments with pregnancies that were never going to happen as a result of an ectopic pregnancy, as an example, that created health issues for them, and then discovered that in their own state they weren't going to be able to have the kind of health care they need. People are starting to see that it's not someone far, far away that this is affecting. It's affecting people we know. It's affecting our daughters. It's affecting our, people that we see every day. And I think that has really been something that the Biden administration has recognized, that we have to be there for women and that we have to support women's rights for reproductive health and health in general. And that's why it was so exciting to see what he did at the Women's History Month event in the White House when he talked about the health care and the research that's going to be done for women.
I wanted to ask you about, how that relates when you put into context, the economy and inflation. And yes, the rate of inflation isn't going up as it did, but prices are not coming down. They're just not going up as fast. Mm-hmm. So when you consider, reproductive rights, the economy and inflation are always, higher up and important. So how does he break through on that? Because people are not happy right now, at least according to the polls and what they've told us about prices in the grocery store and rent and just housing in general.
And the president is addressing the issue of housing in general. And that is going to be one of the main areas that he's focusing on the economic packages that he's been talking about. And he's just done that in the last day or two. But the other part of it, too, is that when you think about the unemployment rate and when you think about the opportunities that this president has created that far surpass those of the previous administration and really a couple of administrations before that as well, that's why it's important for the president to have the resources to really give people at their kitchen table exactly how his policies are going to help them. And that's the only way we're going to be able to, really explain that to people, is to get, that information to them. And once you hear unemployment rates, when you talk about inflation, which has been dropping as well, that's what is going to turn the page for the president. And he has so much that he can talk about in his achievements, but it's critically important that we have the resources to be able to do that.
Regina Montoya, co-chair of the Women's Leadership Forum at the DNC. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack.